Cool. Well, hey everyone, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you're located. My name is Rob. I'm the founder of Koyfin. Super excited about this partnership that we have together with CommonStock and getting our tools in the hands of some of the creators on your end. And really the goal here is to go over the platform, do a demo, answer any questions, make sure that you all understand and know the functionality that we have available to you to really understand stocks and the market. And kind of like make your job easier in terms of writing about ideas or investing in ideas or whatever it is. Just to kind of like step back and give you a little bit of background of what we're doing at Koyfin. Koyfin is a financial data analytics platform, basically gives you a bunch of data and the tools to analyze that data. Before I started Koyfin, I was on Wall Street for a long time, for about 15 years, both on the buy side and sell side. So I got to use all the different applications out there like CapIQ and FactSet and Bloomberg and all the kind of other programs that you could think of, and also a bunch of internal tools that we would have at Goldman or Citigroup. So I really got to see how the sausage is made on Wall Street and kind of like how data is analyzed. And basically 5 years ago, I left the hedge fund that I was at. I started investing on my own, trading on my own. Thought that there was a huge discrepancy and a huge opportunity to basically bridge the gap between what professionals have access to for 25K a year and what individuals and even some professionals have access to for kind of like a more reasonable amount of money. And I thought there was an opportunity to introduce something, a software that basically gives you professional grade data, gives you the analytics to really analyze and process that data and really do it in a modern and intuitive user interface. And that's kind of where Koyfin started about 5 years ago, and we've been building it ever since. And so we have almost 200,000 users on our platform now, or actually over 200,000 users on our platform now. A lot of different mix of hedge fund managers and students and everyone in between. So just a lot of different people using our platform. And the most kind of common use case is really for the equity, for the stock data. But we do have information for ETFs and mutual funds and macro data. And I'd say that's why another reason why serious investors and investment professionals use Koyfin, because we have that kind of scope and breadth of offering. So with that, I'll just kind of shut up and do the demo. And I'll pause there if anyone has any questions before I run through the demo. Cool. Okay. So let me share my screen here. And can you guys see my screen? Oh, yeah, great. Okay. So you all should have access to it. I'm just going to run through kind of like the high level functionality of Koyfin and then get to some questions. But basically, it's a single page application. So kind of like what you see is what you get. There's not any scrolling really. And there's a bunch of data that we have on our platform. The way that you could see the data is hit the search box. And once you're at the search box, you have all these different filters that are here, such as equities, ETFs, mutual funds, indices, bonds, forex, and economic data. So if you're searching for something, you can narrow it down. But this gives you a sense of all the categories that we have on Koyfin. So we have all this data. We cover all global equities and all the financial statements, all the valuation, all the transcripts, all the filings, US ETFs, US mutual funds, indices, bonds, forex, futures, economic data, and then I'd say 80% or 85% of our data and our use cases are on the equity side. So that's where we're the strongest. And we have data for the other stuff, which I'll show you as well. There's 3 paths on Koyfin. So if you kind of like think about Koyfin, there's really 3 paths that a user can take. Path number 1 on here on this menu bar is all the way on the bottom. It's the easiest one to explain. That's where you analyze a specific security. So once I have a security loaded into here, all the functionality below is now kind of like related to Apple. So all the different snapshot, financial analysis, and I'll go through these in more detail, but you could also load up like QQQ in terms of a ETF, or you could load up FMAGX in terms of mutual fund. And then you have just a bunch of functionality related to that security. So that's path number 1, is the security analysis. Path number two are the market dashboards, which is today's market is one of our market dashboards. And basically what the market dashboards do is allow you to browse different parts of the market. So we've kind of sliced and diced, or we've created these dashboards for you to see different parts of the market. Today's market is really the high level overview of what's going on in today's market, but we have all these other market dashboards, which I'll go through in a little bit as well. So that's path number two. And then path number three is really creating your own dashboard. It's where you can add your own widgets, your own portfolio, your own charts, and these become very customizable. So you can sort of like adjust these widgets to whatever you want and put whatever you want in there. So that's kind of like your own little personal workspace of how you want to customize Koyfin with the data that we have on our system. So that's high level security analysis, market dashboards, and then my dashboards, which is your own dashboard. So let me go to kind of the security analysis, because I'd say that's probably the most used or most appropriate one for everyone on this call. Once you have a security loaded up, we have a bunch of different snapshots that you're able to flip through. I'm not sure why news isn't loading up. I'll check that. But basically, this is the high level overview snapshot with some key data, performance data, valuation, capital structure, analyst estimates. So this gives you a really nice high level overview of whatever stock sorry, I'm hovering over here, whatever stock that you're analyzing. If you ever see an underlying number, you could always hover over it to see kind of like where it is in the respective history, right? Because you always want to give context to some of these numbers. So just look for these underlying numbers to kind of see what the historical context of that number is. So this is the overview snapshot. Just one thing some people don't notice is you can highlight what type of graph you want here. So if I wanted a performance graph or I wanted kind of like a snapshot graph, and then I could also load my other chart templates in here. And I'll get into in a little bit how to create these chart templates, but these are all chart templates that I created for myself. So for example, I have where is it here? My valuation. Let's say my EPS estimates. If I wanted this to be kind of my snapshot graph, I would select it here, but this little menu is where you do that. The next snapshot is the description. So what does the ticker or the company do? With some information here. The next snapshot is the dividend snapshot. So basically, how has the dividend evolved over time? So these are the dividend payments. This is the yield. One box that I really like that's differentiated is the shareholder yield. And what this does is it adds all the other kind of yields besides dividend yield. We have a buyback yield. So even though Apple's only paying 0.5% in dividends, they're actually buying back 3.2% of shares on a rolling basis. So this is a really interesting way to think about yield. And then we have a debt pay down yield as well, and then the table of all these yields. ETF exposure is an interesting snapshot just to see where the stock is held by ETFs. You could sort this by weight or by market value. This becomes pretty interesting for some of these ARK names. So if you put in like Palantir and see how concentrated it is in some of the ARK ETFs. So this is a great way to just see where the ETF exposure is for a certain stock. The price target graph is kind of interesting, just showing you where consensus is versus the stock price. So this is the high, the average, and the low on Wall Street in terms of their price target. And you can see where the stock is and that difference historically. So right now there's about a 16% difference between Apple and the average, and that's sort of been kind of that's not too weird relative to history, but you could sort of see kind of like how this evolves over time. And then we also have some distribution in terms of strong buy, sells, stuff like that. We don't have it by each individual bank, so you can't see where Morgan Stanley is, but you could see the distribution in terms of Wall Street estimates. The estimates overview tab is really interesting. So just seeing where, for example, I could select your sales or EPS and seeing what the numbers are for the coming quarters and the coming years. And we have the growth rate. And this is one of my favorite charts to look at, is just where's the sales NTM estimate versus the stock price. So over a long period of time, these two typically will move together. And whenever there's a disconnect, that's always a really interesting opportunity. So kind of like sales have been increasing for Apple in terms of next 12-month estimates. and then the stock price is kind of chopping along here. So that's kind of an interesting dynamic. Another way to look at estimates is this estimate trends tab. So what this does is it looks at each estimate individually. So for example, I could see here for fiscal year 2023, the estimate has been kind of going up. And since a year ago, when we started at $4.98, we're now at $6.55. So obviously this kind of pattern of increasing or upward or positive earnings revisions is what you want to see if you're bullish on a stock. And then the last kind of snapshot here is really interesting. It's the surprise versus analyst estimate snapshot. So you get to select here kind of like a measure here. So let's say it's on sales. This basically tells you where distribution was of consensus. So this is the gray bar of the distribution, mean, high, low. And then the green or red is where the stock kind of like beat or miss. So you could see kind of like Apple over the past 8 quarters really surprised to the upside on sales. Before that, it was just a lot more muted. This gives you a really nice understanding of kind of like, is a company beating or missing on its estimates? If we put in a company like IBM here, just to see a contrast, just a lot less of that green. So just a lot more mixed beats and misses for IBM versus Apple. I'll pause there to see if there's any questions before I move on to the FA and news and graphs.
I do have one question from Stock Metal Investment, who couldn't be here sadly because he's ill. He said, one question I would have asked for Rob, why is there no free cash flow margin selectable? Is it because free cash flow is non-GAAP? Would be pretty useful, in my opinion. I often calculate that in Excel.
Sorry, the free cash flow margin for consensus estimates, or?
He doesn't specify. He says, why is there no free cash flow margin selectable? So I'm maybe assuming, I don't know, free cash flow in relation to revenue or something like that.
Yeah.
Can I leave this up here for now?
So we have just sorry. Let me just think here in free cash flow. Let's see if we have free cash flow per share, EV, market cap. Absolutely right. It's not selectable here in terms of the graph. What you can do is we just introduced a new way to create custom formulas. So what you can do is in one of your like watch lists, for example, you can add a column that's a calculation. So you could do a custom formula here. Let me see here. Where is it here? Custom formula. And I'm going to do this free cash flow margin. And then I'm going to add free cash flow. Cash flow LTM. And then I'm going to do total revenue LTM. And then I'm just going to do A divided by B. And this is going to be a percentage, right? That's a margin. Cool. So now this is my free cash flow margin, and I can add this as a column to my watch list, and here's the free cash flow margin. So this would be a way to calculate it in your watch list. We are the kind of like what we're working on now is allowing you to do this very exact same thing in a graph, but right now you can only do this in a watch list.
That's awesome. I didn't even know you could do that. And I've already had one of these demos, so learned something new again. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So one thing that is a big problem for us and something that I'm trying to figure out how to solve is there's just so much functionality in our system, and we're always kind of like really going deeper and deeper into this functionality because our power users start asking for these things to really do customized calculations and customized workflows. And it's really hard for a system like this to be able to kind of communicate what it can do and what it can't do. And yeah, so that's kind of like one of the reasons we wanted to have this demo, but trying to have more onboarding videos, more demo videos, more tutorials as well on our YouTube channel. And that's something that I think should help.
Awesome.
Cool. So so we covered all the snapshots before on the left-hand side here. Let me get to the financial highlights, which is kind of self-explanatory in terms of these financial statements. So we have these financial statements, which is like highlights, income statement, balance sheet, and all this data comes from CapIQ, so super high, highly accurate and professional grade. We have these kind of like hover things that you can see the trend, which I think is pretty cool for all this information as well. I'd say the one unique function here that's really unique in our platform is the ability to create your own statement or your own sheet here. So if I wanted to create kind of like my column here, I could add whatever data series I wanted. So I could add like EBITDA and EV to EBITDA, or anything from cash flow, and sort of like create my own statement. And the benefit there is once I create my own statement, I could save this as a template. And now this statement is available for any company that I'm looking at. So if there's kind of like particular metrics that you're looking at that are the most important metrics, you could sort of customize them and just look at that for your sheet. The way you add that is kind of, you could hit this new column and then you name your template, and that would give you a blank template to start putting in these groups. Or you can take an existing one. So for example, if I take my highlights one and I click on copy financial template, it would copy it over, and then I can, let's say I don't want market cap or any of these items, I would right click on it. Should be able to right click and delete it. Let me see here. Can I add this? For some reason, my mouse cannot right click. I'm trying to think. All right, I have to get back at that, but you should be able to right click.
Is it an Apple mouse?
It is, yeah.
Hold control, and then click.
Oh my God.
You're welcome. That's why I'm here, Rob.
This is awesome. Austin, thank you very much. You always got my back. How come I've never had to do that before?
I don't know. Do you use a computer? No,
I
the only reason I know is because I got a new fancy computer and I like asked Twitter, how do you right click on an Apple mouse? So yeah.
It's because I can, like, in my browser, I can't right click, because I used to be able to right click on the top right of my mouse.
Obviously your assistant usually is the one that does all your work for you, and you're just here acting like you work.
You guys see that I'm just the face of Koyfin. Like, this is just, it's just this, and that's why I'm here. Absolutely, yeah, awesome. So thank you. So you get to right click. However, if you're on a Windows, probably much easier. If you're on a Mac, you can right click and you could name this thing. You could remove it, and I don't have to, whatever it is. But this is a way to customize your template in kind of like whatever way you want. News. So news is really great for us. We have Yahoo and some RSS feeds, and we have Reuters news that we recently bought. So just a lot of high quality news for each individual stock. Significant events is kind of interesting, like what's the company reporting. Filings is cool. We have all the filings from any company in the world. Takes a second to load because we load all the filings, so you could just go to like the 1994 filings if you wanted to. But we have every single filing here from around the world in case that's your thing. And then transcripts as well. So any sort of transcript we have here that you can read. And one feature that we introduced recently that I just want to mention is this transcript search. So you could hit search on, where is it? Search transcripts right here. Once you do, it takes you to actually this little menu item over here, transcript search. So if you wanted to look at like inflation and see where it's showing up, you could do that here, and then really filter the results however you want. So if you wanted Apple here, which is what we're filtering, that's kind of here. If you wanted to see it for anything, you could kind of like take away this filter and see it for any company. If you wanted to see what it looks like in the energy sector, you could do that as well. If you wanted to add a watch list here, So security list, one of your watch lists, you could do that as well. So let's say I wanted to just look at it for the NASDAQ 100. And then kind of like once you click on it, you'll be able to see where inflation or whatever item is mentioned that you're looking for. So it's kind of cool if you're thinking about a topic and a company mentions a topic, you could go in and really start looking into what other companies have mentioned that topic and stuff like that. So I just saw that there's a question in chat. Is there a way to combine consensus estimates with historical financial results? Yes. So the way that you would do that is in the FA template. If you go to my template and you add a series here called historical analyst estimates, you can see what the consensus was or what the results were. So here I could see the average, and so this is kind of the average, and then the results were. So the only reason I'm pausing is the results are GAAP, and I'm trying to think if we have non-GAAP, if we have a non-GAAP way of putting the results in here. So this is non-GAAP, so this is pro forma because these are estimates. And if I go to the income statement and I do diluted EPS, I believe that's actually GAAP. So I'm not sure if we have non-GAAP results in here. I'll have to check that. I have to ask my team and give you an answer to that, but I don't think we have a way to do that now. I know we want to, but I don't think there's a way to do that now. So going back to transcripts. So remember, you could search transcripts. You can also search filings. So to the extent that you wanted to search filings under advanced search, we have the transcript search. Sorry, you could search news and filings we're actually working on right now, and you'll be able to search filings in the next couple of weeks as well. We'll be releasing that. Okay. The last thing under company analysis, which is really useful and kind of probably our most used feature, is this ability to really chart whatever metric you want and create these graph templates. So obviously we have the price chart here. So this is a candle chart, super interactive. You could zoom in, zoom out, but then you could really add whatever series you want to add here. So if you wanted to add PE in here, you could do that. If you wanted to add market cap, you can't do that because I know market cap broke this morning, but let me add free cash flow per share over EV yield. You could do that as well. If you wanted to add short interest, you can do that. There was a bug reported this morning on market cap, and so unfortunately market cap is down for a little bit, but we're gonna get that back up. But we have about 400 different data series that you can add here, from anything from technical analysis to performance, to total return, to Bollinger Bands, to dividend payments, to beta, to correlation. So you can really get creative in terms of what you add here and what you graph. And obviously graphing something just gives you context into what it looks like historically. And then you can also do cross company analysis. So if I wanted to compare Apple versus Facebook, I could add Facebook here, and all these kind of like lines are now appear for Facebook. This chart is probably a little bit too busy because there's just like a lot of information here, but you start seeing kind of like really interesting divergences here, right? So like the free cash flow yield opens up here pretty wide. Obviously, this is a valuation measure, and Facebook has sold off much more than Apple, but this is a really interesting way of comparing two companies. Once you do have a chart here, one thing that you can do, which is really easy on Koyfin, is to create a picture of this chart to put in a blog or to post to CommonStock, or to post in your Substack. So you can add a title here, right? So this is like busy chart of Facebook versus Apple, and I can save that, and I'm going to make this maybe 28. Right, so now I have a title. If you have like a logo that you use in terms of like your branding, you could do that. You could highlight that as well. So let me go here to my desktop and see if I have a logo here. Let's say you work at JP Morgan, which probably none of us do, but whatever logo you want to put in here, that'll kind of like show up. And then if I right click, and now I know to hit control, I would copy image and paste that in the chart. I could download this. I could connect this to my Twitter and just tweet kind of like right from here, and it would tweet this chart. So a lot of flexibility on kind of like once you create a chart on what you can do with it. The other kind, sorry, was there a question? The other thing that I would encourage you to do is once you have just a bunch of ways that you're looking at a stock, a bunch of measures, you could save that as a template. So what a template does is just saves these kind of fields, so you don't have to retype them every time. So here I have, for example, my price target template, which is kind of like very similar to what we were looking before in terms of like the different price targets. I have my my revenue template. I have my drawdown template, right? So drawdown just kind of like tells me what the drawdown of a stock is and kind of like the return and the return of $10,000. So just a lot of different ways of looking at a stock, but then making sure that you're able to save it as a template. And so you don't have to recreate these graphs every time, and that you have that at your disposal pretty quickly. The other thing that I would mention here is this is the G graph, which is the most flexible way to create a graph because you can just put in any sort of metric you want in here. The other thing that we have here is called a performance graph. And because performance is so important, if you wanted to look at, for example, the performance of Tesla versus Bitcoin versus, I don't know, CL1, which is crude oil, what this does is it normalizes everything from 0% and just shows you what the return is over that time frame. And so if you select 5 years, you really could start seeing these wide divergences of performance. And we also give you the CAGR here, right? So over the past 5 years, Bitcoin has averaged a CAGR of 100% per year. Tesla has had a CAGR of 75% per year. So this is a pretty interesting way to just look at CAGRs over time and just to be able to see performances over time and what that looks like. Cool. Any questions on that?
I had a quick question. It's not related to what you just talked about, and it's like probably one of those stupid, super niche things that you shouldn't really prioritize. You know, when you went over the searchable transcripts, is there currently a way, or have you ever thought about, like, say I want to search for the term inflation across like 20 companies I'm following? Would there be a way to like just immediately quantify how many times that word has been said over the last 2 years, like based on each quarterly report, and then like throw up a chart or a bar graph or something? Like,
yeah,
do that manually, but
yeah. I think that's a really cool way. That's a really interesting way to visualize it, which we don't have right now. So we just released our transcript search, which is kind of like the core functionality. I'd say in the next go around, as we're gathering feedback on how we could improve, that's something that we've heard about. I know it's something that systems like Sentio and Bloomberg do very well in terms of like visualizing the trend over time. So that's a great suggestion. That's something that we definitely want to do.
Awesome. Thanks.
If I may, quick question. Yeah. In the graph where you basically can do anything you want, you have, I think it's FA, or no, yeah, right here. G. You have all of them sort of separate. Is there a way of having them combined for better visual?
Yeah, great question. So, so these graphs, what you can do here is these kind of like separators, you can move up and down. So this is kind of like how you separate it. And the way that you could, so whenever it makes sense to combine graphs, or sorry, you can combine any graph you want. So if I wanted to combine this graph and this graph, what I would do is in this little legend, there's little kind of like arrows so this is merge up, this is merge down, this is delete. So I would merge this up, and now this would be kind of a combined with this graph. And you can also like, let me just show you maybe a more real world example. Let's see, free cash flow yield. And then if I do, let's say dividend yield, I hope these two. So because these are both yields, right? If I wanted to combine them, they'd be on the same axis here now, but I could also make them on different axes by right clicking, by holding my control. Thank you, Austin. And then if I turn this group axis off, it would actually put these on two separate axes. So sometimes maybe it makes sense to do that And so that's kind of like the way to do that. So thank you for asking me that. I forgot about that. So what you can do is you can adjust this height, you can combine different things, you can make them on different axes. You can, if you right click here, you can make this linear or log. We default to log, which is kind of like what I prefer, but some people prefer linear. You can also change the price to adjusted versus unadjusted. Adjusted basically adjusts for dividends. So every time a dividend is paid, the stock price drops because that dividend is paid to the shareholder. What we do is then we go back in history and adjust the historical price by the dividend adjustment. Some people prefer not to see that. And so you could turn that off in here as well. And so that would, so for example, if you look at a ticker like TLT, which pays a decent dividend, just show you here what it looks like over the past 10 years. So this is kind of like the dividend adjusted figure. If you don't adjust for dividend, then it looks much more flat because it basically the stock goes down every time it pays a dividend. So there's a whole there's a school of thought on why you should adjust versus why you shouldn't adjust. I fall very strongly into you should adjust because it's just a corporate action. It's basically transferring money from the shareholder, from the company to the shareholder, but some people sort of prefer to not adjust. So that's available as well. So thank you for mentioning that. The other thing that you have here is you can look at the table of the prices. So here we have show table, high table, and you can always download this information as well to your Excel. So if you have like PE or whatever it is, you'd be able to. TLT doesn't have a PE. Just change this to Apple. You can download this information to Excel to play around with it or look at whatever. So we have that ability as well. Cool. So that's on the graphs. Let me get to kind of the market dashboards real quick. So the second path that I mentioned before, these market dashboards. They typically have a graph and a bunch of securities. The way you interact with them is kind of like clicking this button. So every time I click this button to the left of the security, you'll be able to add it to the graph. So here materials is now going to be added to the graph here. You can change it to 1 year or 3 year, or whatever it is, and kind of see how it's doing. If you wanted to see a timestamp of when it shows up, you can always hover to the left of here. So energy here is as of 10:34 a.m. Eastern time. We're unfortunately very US centric in our system. So people like Connor have to convert the time in their head, but everything right now is US centric, but you could always hover over this dot to see the timestamp. Let me just see a question from Pat here. Is there a way to find average multiples across ETFs, like average PE ratio within IWM, average gross margin, etc.? Great question. There is not a quick way to do that. There's a way to do that, but let me show you that in a second when we get to dashboards, and so I'll show you how to find those averages. This is today's market, so this is kind of like your homepage. We also have market news, which is kind of like your news. In here, there's different topics that you could set up. So industries, macro, world economic data, all this stuff comes from Reuters. You could also set up your own little dashboard. So if you wanted to add a topic in here, so for example, if you were following like clean energy, no, clean energy is not a topic. If you were following energy and maybe international atomic energy or renewable energy is probably clean energy, you could select that as a topic. If you wanted to have a region as well. And now in here, just call this clean. Everything in here would be basically clean energy news stories. So this is a way to kind of like select which topics you want to follow. Another really useful dashboard, which I like, is called the Market Movers dashboard. So in here, what we do is we show you the biggest one-day movers, which is self-explanatory, but what I really like is this x-axis, which shows you the relative volume. And what relative volume does is it basically takes the volume up until this point in time today. So right here, it's 10:37 a.m. New York time. It basically shows you what the stock is trading on relative to its past 10 days. So I think this is Schwab. So Charles Schwab is trading at 4 times normal volume relative to the past 10 days, and it's down 8%. So this is a great way during the day to kind of like see what's really trading on the most volume, and the most volume being defined, like Citigroup is always trading on high volume or some penny stock, but this is relative volume to itself. So I think this is kind of like much more important, much cooler. You can also select what you want to see here. So I want to see the NASDAQ 100 as my focus list, or I could see holdings from an ETF, right? So if I wanted to see the XLE holdings, I could type XLE in here and see all the holdings from XLE. Or I could select one of my watch lists, and I'll show you how to create a watch list in a bit. But let's say I wanted to see all my SaaS stocks, I could see my SaaS stocks here as well. Cool. So that's market movers. Let me skip my watch list for a second because that's on the third kind of workflow that we're going to cover. You have a lot of these other market dashboards that we show here. We have world equity indices here, which again work the same way as before. So you select this category, you could select 1 year and 3 year. The only difference here to the other ones is you can select what columns you want to see here. So if I click columns, I could select different time frames I want to see these on. So 5 year, 10 year, 52-week high, low. And then once you have the columns, you can sort of sort by those columns to see what's performing the most or the least. So we have for world equity indices, we have it for sectors. So you can see kind of like the sector rotation is really interesting with XLE over the past year and where it is. Factors, I'd say, is super interesting and important. Not a lot of platforms have this. So if I kind of like select value and growth, which are just 2 really interesting factors to look at, you could see this kind of 1 year, 3 year, 5 year time frame of this huge growth boom that we've had, and obviously kind of like reversing over the past year. And that's been influencing and driving a lot of performance. So this could be a really interesting dashboard to monitor. We have global yield. So now that yields are in the news, this is a good one to track. And all this is for is that if you don't know what the tickers are for the yields, or you don't know they exist, you could just sort of browse which yields are here and just add them to the chart, right? And so you could add these to the chart if you wanted to. If you're ever in a market dashboard and there's a ticker here and you click on this ticker, what that's going to do is it's actually going to load the ticker into security analysis so that you can analyze it further, right? So if I wanted to look at, let's say, Australian 10-year yield, I would click on that. Once I click on it, it gets loaded up into security analysis, and now I'm in the G chart. So it's a way to kind of like take whatever's in the market dashboard and then double click on it and get to it in this security analysis section. And now I can look at it over the past 10 years, 20 years. I could compare this, let's say, versus, I don't know, would be like US 10 year if I wanted to, as another series. So now you're in the G chart and you could just do kind of like that. You have that ultimate flexibility, but that's a way to get from a market dashboard security to a security analysis security. So I'm not going to go through all these market dashboards, but you can see what they are: yield curves, corporate credit, commodities, world income, world economics, currencies, recent IPOs, and so make sure to check those out. I do want to cover two market dashboards that I think are really cool. So one is the market scatter plot, which is a way to basically look at a universe on an XY axis. So if I wanted to look at, let's say, again, you can select whatever you want to look at. So if I wanted to look at the NASDAQ 100, and let's say I wanted to look at it on forward growth. So I'm going to look at it on EPS estimate, year-on-year change, let's say FY2. So kind of like what the expected second year outgrowth rate versus PE and TM. This is a way to kind of just look at what are the outliers, right? So we sort of know that growth is correlated with valuation. And in this case, it's a pretty really interesting correlation, or very strong correlation. And now you could sort of see kind of like what are the outliers. So like T-Mobile is an outlier, probably some things going on here in terms of accounting stuff of why it's growing so fast. So with these telecom companies, I'd be a little bit careful with just taking this at face value. But then you could sort of like zone in here and see like, hey, who's really growing a lot over the next 2 years? And really that's not in the valuation. And then really take a view of like, why is that the case? Is it that the market doesn't believe it? Is it that there's just kind of like some negative sentiment built up here? Is it just a sector story? So like, Micron is growing at 35%, and trading at about a 6 times earnings multiple. So I would say the market is really discounting that growth rate, or kind of like saying these are peak earnings, and that would be an interesting topic to take a view on, or even describe in terms of like, hey, this company's growing so highly or growing so fast, then the market doesn't really believe that growth rate, or maybe it's Baidu or PayPal or whatever it is. So you could do a lot with this XY scatter plot. Some things that I will look at is like performance, let's say year to date. So if I look at the price change, like let's say year to date or over the past year, versus maybe the price change over the past, let's say 3 years. Okay, so you know, not a lot of correlation here. Let me just look at price change. What was I looking at the other day? That was so I think I was kind of like looking at this analysis, which is like year-to-date price change versus price change over the past year. Obviously, they'll be somewhat related because the year-to-date change is a subset of the one-year change, but just kind of like this continuous momentum, or this really continuation of the performance of what's working over the past year versus what's working year-to-date. I thought this was pretty interesting, and I think it even looks more so for the S&P 500 in terms of this correlation. And again, looking at these outliers is always kind of interesting in terms of like what has more short-term momentum versus longer-term momentum and stuff like that. And then again, you can, I think you can download this information as well over here to Excel if you needed to. And then the last thing I wanted to show you before I get to market dashboard is this function called lots of charts, which I think is really cool. As the name implies, it gives you a lot of charts to just see where the trends are. So again, you get to select kind of like an index that you want to look at, and then just be able to see over the long term, what does the chart look like, to see if there's any like what's trending up, what's trending down, what's kind of changing in the charts. And you can also select kind of how your chart looks like over here under options. So if I want to just have a normal price chart, I could do that. If I want to select one of my templates, graph templates, I could do that as well. So for example, I could select my price target template, right? And really get to see what the different price targets are for all these charts. So obviously this is super busy, and this is going to be there's going to be a lot of information here. But if you're looking, if you use technical analysis like I do, and how I look at the market in terms of what's trending up, what's trending down, what's reversing or potentially reversing, this is a great tool for you to use in terms of looking at lots of charts at once. And then we also have the economic calendar here for different countries, which you could select here to see what the consensus is and what's being reported on an economic basis. Okay, any questions on that before we get into my dashboards, which is kind of setting up your own dashboard? Cool. So let's go to my dashboards. And so we covered, the first section was security analysis. The second section was market dashboards. And the third section is my dashboards, where you set up your own dashboard. So let me show you kind of like when you set up a new dashboard, which is kind of like right here on the new button, you get this blank space. And so you get this blank space of being able to add widgets or being able to add components that you want and really customize the space for yourself. So I could add a watch list table, I could add a graph template, I could add an intraday graph, I could add a performance graph, I could add a news widget, I could add a scatter plot. So those are kind of like the widgets or the components that I have access to. We're going to be adding a transcript widget here as well, and a filings widget as well. So that's coming up next. But these are the widgets you have today. And so let's say I wanted to add a watch list widget. This would be my kind of like watch list. In here's where I select what watch list I want to display. So for example, if I wanted the semis watch list, which I have, or my SaaS watch list, this is where it'd be. I can also create a new watch list, right? So if I have a common stock watch list. Like this is my new watch list. You could add tickers in here. So Apple, Tesla, whatever it is. You can import tickers. So if I hit import, I can copy paste a bunch of tickers in here. So if you have tickers in an Excel sheet or another program, you could import them into here and really have that list populate. And then the other thing, which is really cool, is you could select the columns that you want, right? So all those kind of like 300 or 400 fields that we have, you know, EV to EBITDA or EV to sales or market cap, or well, not market cap this morning because it's broken, but short interest, you know, whatever financial or valuation or growth estimate you want in there, you could select that and it'll just show up in the columns. And once you have these columns selected, you could save those columns as a template. And again, that's meant for you not to have to select those columns every single time. So for example, this is my valuation template that I selected before, which has all my valuation measures. And let me actually select my other watch list so you guys see some more stocks. But so these are kind of like my watch list, Rob's watch list, and these are all the valuation columns that I've selected before and saved as a template. I also have a performance template in here, right? So this is all my performance metrics that I have in here as well. The question before from I forget from who it was. Let me see here. From Pat. So Pat asked, can you look at averages for ETFs? And this is actually where you can do that. So what I would do if I wanted to look at an average from ETF is I would create a watch list with the ETF constituents and then look at a summary row, which you can do as an average, right? So I could add a summary row, which is an average, and out the bottom, I have average of all the stuff. And let me show you how to do that very quick. So if I wanted to look at, let's say, the PE of the XLE, I would go in here, I would select the XLE, I would go under snapshot holdings, I would download these holdings to Excel. So these holdings are now in CSV. I would open them up, and I don't think you guys could see my Excel, but I'm just copying and pasting from my Excel. I go to my dashboard. Just go here. I create a new watch list called, let's say, XLE. Add ticker, import securities, paste them in. So now these are just kind of like a gut check. Did I match them correctly? And if it's US securities, it should always match them correctly. And now I would go to my valuation template, or you could select the valuation measures from your columns. So these are all my valuation measures. And then in here, I would, in the summary row, I would add average. I could do medium as well if you want. And so now I have kind of these valuation measures and what the average valuation measure is. You can also, for example, look at the, let's see if I have the S&P 500 in here. I do. So if I'm looking at the S&P 500, and these are all the stocks in the S&P 500, I could actually group them, right? So I could group them by sector. And now these are grouped by sector. These are my kind of groups by sector. And if you add a summary row like average and median, you'll have the average and median for each sector as well. So now I know that like my, on a PE basis, that the average for communication services is 25 times. And then if I go all the way to the bottom, I know that the average for the entire S&P 500 is 25 times as well, and the median is 19.4 times. So this is a way to look at averages on groups, and you could group by sector. The thing that we don't have right now, which I think would be really useful, is to look at these over time. So look at a historical PE of the S&P 500 over time, or look at the historical PE of the XLE over time. And that's something we don't have right now, but that's something that has been requested a lot, and something that we do want to get. Does that answer your question, Pat? Cool. Okay. So just to kind of continue on this dashboard path. So what I've done right now is just work with one widget, which is the watch list widget. What you can do is you could actually shrink this and add other widgets as well. So you could actually add another watch list column and have this be two different widgets. More commonly is what people do is they'll add a graph widget. So they'll have a graph widget here, and this will show the price. And because these two widgets are linked, they're both in group A. So this is group A, group A. Anytime I select kind of like something here, it's going to show up in the graph, right? So now I have kind of like my, let's say 10-year graph in here. And this is my 10-year price chart that I can just fumble through here. I can also switch to one of my graph templates in here. So I could switch to, let's say my PE measure. And so this would show PE. And now I could sort of like go through my different stocks and see the PE. If you wanted to select multiple stocks in here, right now it's sort of selecting a single stock. You could toggle this to multiple, and now I could add different stocks here with different. This should probably not be the same color, but you get the idea. So now I have kind of like multiple stocks in here, and at least I could see kind of like what the trend is over time. But that gets super busy very fast. So maybe one would be the best thing to do. So a lot of flexibility you have here. I have kind of like, just to show you like my dashboards, I have a dashboard here with one watch list and 3 charts. So if I select anything here, it changes all the charts at once, just to be able to see kind of like what the price chart looks like, and some correlation beta metrics, and some revenue growth metrics. I have a scatter plot with some news for another chart. So just a lot of flexibility that you could have here. And the last thing I'll mention is just on the watch list table, when you select these columns, one of the things that you can do here is under portfolio tools, you can actually select some portfolio weights for a watch list. So you can actually have a portfolio where you're selecting where you're inputting the number of shares. So you can see here, quantity has a little typewriter here. So that means it's a user inputted field. So I'm inputting the number of shares I have, and it's going to calculate the weight for that watch list for me. And if I'm inputting a purchase date and an average cost per share, it's actually going to calculate some of these other fields for me, like gain, loss, and stuff like that. So let me show you what that looks like for my portfolio. Of course, this is not loaded properly because I switched it. So where's my portfolio view? So I haven't inputted the average cost here, but let's say if you let's say I bought Carvana at like $60 and I put it here, all of a sudden your total gain and your total loss is going to be calculated automatically. And because I have the quantity here inputted for all my shares, I have the weight calculated. Just put that here, it's a little easier to see. I have my quantity and weight calculated. So kind of like the total for my portfolio is 100%, and then I can sort here by weight and kind of see what my highest weight stocks here, and keep track of this portfolio every day. There's a summary column we have called weight adjusted sum, and what this does is for any column it'll calculate the weight adjusted average. So here for the 1-year price change, my weight adjusted average is minus 3%. Because you could see FDS and CMG here are such big weights that on a weight adjusted basis, it brings the average up. So this is a really cool column to have in terms of a weight adjusted metric here for any portfolio. And so if you put PE in here, it's going to calculate the weight adjusted PE or the average PE for any of the columns here as well. Cool. I think that's about it for what I wanted to mention and show to you. I know that's a lot of stuff. Any questions on any of those things?
I had a quick one on the portfolio tool. I think I might have asked you this before, probably. In terms of like lots, like say you have Facebook, but you've been buying it over 3 years and you've bought it 25 times and sold it 7 or whatever. Like having different lots in it as well. Do you think that's something that will eventually be possible to add to this tool?
Yeah, for sure. So our portfolio functionality is like super bare bones. It's very basic. It does just the essentials right now. I'd say the couple of things that we want to do are, one, integrate with brokers. So for you not to like input all these values, for you to just hook up to a broker and just suck up the values, so you don't have to like manually input that. The second thing is the slots feature, so the slots calculation. So Obviously, if you're buying and selling stuff, you'll have different cost basis. So being able to kind of like double click here or have an option where it's like, hey, I have different lots. So my average is actually not just one time. It's actually a bunch of things that I want Koyfin to calculate. So that's another thing. The third thing is just having more advanced portfolio tools. For example, I want to see the performance of this portfolio over time. I don't want to just see it for 1 year or 3 months. I actually want to graph it, and I actually want to save it as an index, right? So here for my portfolio, I want to see Rob's watch list. I actually want to go here under graph, and I actually want to put Rob's watch list in here as a ticker and be able to see the performance or the PE or the market cap or the average market cap or whatever it is. That's something that we want to get to, and that's not something we have today, but that's clearly kind of like that's what our users want to do, and that's what we want to create. If you have any other suggestions in terms of like portfolio calculations or analysis, please feel free to kind of tell me now or offline. But we're compiling these requests. I'm thinking about like how do we move this to the next level, and these are some of the functions that we're thinking about.
Awesome.
Little bit late, but I don't know if you showed this. Is there a way to chart a derived metric, like a derived PE ratio with some other combination? Because I think we can't do it in the chart, right? I think we can do the custom metric on Watchlist for sure, but not on the chart.
Yep. So that's the next phase of our custom watch list. Sorry, custom metric is first phase was the watch list. And the next phase that we're working on right now is the chart, is being able to do the exact same thing. It'll say like custom metric here, and you'll be able to kind of like add or do any sort of calculation on any of the assets here.
Cool. Yeah.
Cool. Any other questions?
Also, is there a way that we could get more than 20 years, or are you limited by APIs for 20 years, like somehow?
Yeah, we're limited in terms of financial statements. We're limited to the 20 years.
Damn, that's been a heartbreaker for me.
Yeah, let me think about that. Let me think about that.
Yeah, I mean, because if I want to look at Apple, it's like I want to look at the 70s too.
Yeah, so Apple, so like in the graph, you can actually see the full history, right? So if you, sorry, this is not Apple. Actually, I want to show you this feature, which I forgot. In the command bar, this is like a really useful way to access whatever you want. So I was going through the menu to kind of show the layout of stuff. But what you can do is once you start, like you see these little shortcuts we have for the different functions. So if you wanted to look at the Apple chart, you could just type in Apple, enter, and then G is the shortcut because G here or GM. And if you type that in, it'll actually take you to the Apple chart. So if you wanted to look at the Apple, let's say description, you could type in Apple, enter DES, and it would take you to the description. So it's a quick way to like really like once you learn the shortcuts to really get around the system. The other thing that you can do is if you're looking for Apple like revenue, you can just type in, instead of the shortcut, you could type in total revenue, if I spell correctly, and it would actually find it where it is in the graph, and it would just pull up the graph for total revenue, so you don't have to search for it. So if I wanted to look for Apple PE, I can do that very quickly. It would go to the G chart, it would find the PE series, and then you could see it kind of like for quickly historically. And sorry, Modern Growth, you asked me for revenue, so let me just show you what that looks like. So if you go to the graph here and you hit all, we actually have it here from 1988. I think Apple went public in 1982 or 83, so I don't think you'll have it from the 70s. I think if you do IBM here, you will have it for a very long time. No, same thing. So for whatever reason, Capital IQ only gives it to us back to the 80s.
Yeah, cool. Thanks.
Cool. Well, thanks so much for taking the time to kind of go over the platform with me. Connor, thanks so much for setting it up and for the partnership. We love it. Hope you guys are getting use out of it. My email is rob@koyfin.com. You want to hit me and shoot me an email, that's great. If you have any feedback or suggestions, you can shoot them to me. I'd say the most efficient thing is on the top right of Koyfin, there's a feedback button. If you put it in there, I see that, our product team sees that, and then other users can vote on it. So that if you have a suggestion, it's great if you can tell me, but if you put it in there, it's sort of then gets into the workflow, and we can prioritize it and see what people are voting on and stuff like that. And then we on that feedback button, if you hit it, there's also kind of like email us. So if you have a question or a number doesn't look right, or you have a whatever, that's kind of like the help desk. And our email is also help@koyfin.com. So any questions, let us know. And awesome. Thanks so much, guys. Hope it's helpful. And talk to you soon.
Thank you,
Rob. All right. Thanks, Rob.
Bye, guys.